Black Star is a collection at the Image Center in Toronto, Canada, that originates with a photo agency, or the Black Star Publishing Company, which thrived in the United States between the 1930s and the 1990s. It was one of the most active press photography distribution agencies in the world, and it serviced publications, newspapers, magazines, and books. Photographs in the archives span all the way from the beginning of the 20th century to near the end, and we're very fortunate to have the Black Star collection here at the Image Center because it's essentially an endless fountain of visual culture.
The idea with this exhibition was to dig into our big collection of 300,000 black and white gelatin silver prints and try to find interesting stories, unknown stories, or lesser known photographers to discuss the mechanics of the agency and how a press agency worked throughout the 20th century, what type of events or personalities would be photographed, and every time we had some ephemera, some accompanying documents, we would include them to just explain again the relationship between the photographer and the agency, the photographer and the magazine. We also included a couple of publications to show what type of photographs were sent to the agency and how these same photographs would be published in magazines and newspapers.
There's a lot of subject matter that Black Star is incredibly good at representing for a variety of reasons, and one of the areas of greatest interest is the civil rights movement. Black Star Agency was well known, well respected for capturing different moments of the civil rights movement. And so there's a whole range of subject matter, a lot of iconic images that we know and love still. We wanted to dig into some of the less well-known stories. We have a series of photographs that were filed under voter registration that capture a lot of the different efforts in the civil rights movement to register specifically African Americans in the United States to vote, which was often a key way that corrupt local governments would try to suppress democratic participation. We also have photographs of rebellions, for example, the Watts rebellions, commonly called the Watts riots, which was kind of an uprising in a poor neighborhood that ultimately was put down by the US military. And those photographs are incredibly graphic and striking and unusual, and actually very little seen today. They were distributed in their time, but now when we look at them, we can see that there's a great deal to be learned about an event like that undermines historical stories that have been told and supports narratives that have often had a harder time finding a public audience.
Out of the nearly 300,000 Black Star photographs in the collection, around 2,500 of them were taken in Canada, but they're mostly stock photos, scenic photos, not news photographs. And if we were doing an exhibition about news stories, we needed to include Canadian news stories. So the Canadian Press offered that, and it also offered the opportunity to contrast the Black Star Agency with a different type of agency, which is a wire photo service. They were established in 1917. And they really are the independent national news agency here in Canada. They are the ones behind the scenes providing news, photographs, and now also video. The Canadian Press room is in the middle of the exhibition. Once you enter the room, there are 6 stories, and they start in 1970 with Pierre Trudeau and the October Crisis, and this was when Trudeau enacted the War Measures Act. And the show starts there because this was really when the Canadian Press's photo service really came into its own and really began to expand alongside Trudeau and everything that was happening at that time. For me, finding the Elizabeth May story was really interesting because it was in a Point Tupper, Nova Scotia nuclear facility folder in the archive, and I found it fascinating that it's in such perfect condition. And then we can compare that story to something like the October Crisis. This was a breaking news story, and it was also Trudeau. And so these photographs were not only rushed at that time to get them out as fast as possible, but they've been reused over and over and over again. It's just really interesting to look around and have a look at the images visually and compare them as well to what you may think about one story getting perhaps more attention than another.
One of the biggest surprises that I had was when I was looking into the German Kohls collection we have in Black Star. I expected to see the common photographs made in the 30s in Paris or Berlin. But what I discovered is a whole series that she made in French Guiana in 1941 when she was fleeing Europe and the Nazi regime. And then she ended up on a boat from Marseille. And they stopped in French Guiana. And she had then the opportunity to photograph the penal colony, the labor camp, which was a place where nobody would go, especially during the Second World War. And so the fact that she was able to take some photographs was an incredible surprise, with images that had never been displayed or shown anywhere or to anybody. And then there's a couple of documents accompanying the photographs. There's a 2-page text reflecting what a photographer would do to try to sell a photo reportage. So it's not only that it's a new story of a place where we have very, very few images in the world in general, and then on top of that you see the mechanics of the relationship between the agency and the photographer, and what the photographer has to do to make sure that the story can be sold to many clients.